Hello, I am William Jamal Wright,
And I'm Hattie.
and this is our podcast, HattieJo. Um, what are we doing? And
So what are we doing?
on this episode, I thought it would be interesting to discuss the prison strike that actually took place during the month of September. I actually noticed it through one of my followers. I follow someone on Twitter that's politically active here in the Durham community, and he's very much fighting for the cause of social justice. And he tweeted about like the prison strike movement and what prisoners across the country have gone on strike and their demands and what they're asking for. And I think it's really like it's a good topic to. It's an interesting topic for me to discuss and kind of think about because a lot of times we think about prisoners and we think about people who are in jail and we don't really consider their humanity. They are still humans. Some of them have done some deplorable things. But some of them have just made some mistakes, and it ended them up in jail. And I think it's an important exercise for us to think about those people and think about the ways in which like policies and our society handles them,
Right.
And kind of just discuss like maybe some of the issues that they have. And as a society, kind of weigh in on that and making sure that we are treating them equally and treating them fairly and treating them in humane ways.
Right, because I think this is very interesting to talk about. Because, of course, my angle is gymnastics, as it always is. And so the Larry Nassar trial has taken place. And before I get into that, my other point that I wanted to say first was just the point of jail is to punish people, right?
Yes.
And so we take away some of their liberties, right? They're not free to go out and do whatever they want. They're not free to live in their own homes, and right, that some of those liberties get taken away.
Mm-hmm.
But some liberties, like, we still grant them. And the other point of jail, for most people, right, some people get life sentences or they get the death penalty or whatever, but I would say the overwhelming majority of people that go to jail at some point leave.
Yes.
Right? So the point of jail is not to, you made one mistake, you're done forever, you're punished forever, right? Because if that was the point, we would just execute every single person, right? Or put them life in prison, every single one.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So, like, the fundamental goal here is to punish them justly for whatever crime, mistake they've committed, but then get them back to normal society.
Yes.
Right? So I think that's something we have to keep in mind, and the point about Larry Nassar I was going to make was people do have unalienable rights. And so Larry Nassar was a child molester, and that is just absolutely awful. And a lot of people were calling, like, can't wait till he's in prison, like, he's going to get a taste of his own medicine, you know, like, if I was the jail guy and he was reporting, like, abuse, like, I wouldn't say anything about it. I'd say, like, now you know how it feels, you know, and while those types of comments feel really good because what he did was so disgusting and so wrong, like, that's not how our society operates, right? If it was an eye for an eye like that, we would be just like animals.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And, like, things would escalate, like, every small injustice would escalate, and we'd be constantly in war, constantly killing, you know what I mean? Like, that's just not...
our whole society would
right,
be,
and so that's an extreme example, because in no way do I want to protect this horrible Larry Nassar, but I think that's just something that really illustrates we can't be calling for him to be abused and violated. Like, that's not how our society works. If it did, that would be the punishment he got, right? Not life in prison.
Yeah, and
do you know
I think,
what I mean? Like, and so it's like we really have to, even though it's easy to not want to treat people as human beings, like, for a civilized society, like, we have to.
Yes, and I think, like, for the specific, like, the prison strike, I think they're calling for more, like, political and, like governmental reform.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
I was just trying
like,
to make the example because
yeah.
this is a really, it's very easy for people to be like, this guy molested young girls, like we want the worst for him.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's a very natural reaction, that's a very understandable reaction, but at some point, like we have to treat people, as human beings.
Yeah.
And especially in the lesser scenarios where they're not sentenced to life in prison, right? They have certain rights. Like if you went to prison,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
and I get, like, I completely get what you're saying, but I do think, like, it isn't apples to apples.
Sure.
With the Larry Nassar issue and like what you're speaking to. I think these, like, prison strike we're going to talk about and go through some of the points. I do think that is a little bit like they're asking for more like structural changes.
Yes, and I agree. I just, like I said, was trying to bring up something diversive that could get people thinking about the conversation. So the main summary, I guess, if you could summarize the prison strike, would be that prisoners want improvements to the conditions of prisons, and as well improvements to the policies that recognize the humanity of imprisoned men and women. So they have several points here, and we're going to talk about just a few. So do you want to read off the first one we're going to talk about?
Sure. So the first one is an immediate end to prison slavery. All persons imprisoned in any place or detention under United States jurisdiction must be paid the prevailing wage in their state or territory for their labor. And so I don't know like what the wage should be, but I do I feel like prisons and detention centers, they become just kind of like a way to get free labor for like companies. And it's kind of like this representation of our society, and like how can we create like
how can we take advantage of people?
How can we take advantage of people
in a legal way?
And like I do feel that like these prisoners who are put behind bars and they are working labor, and they are used as a labor force, I do think that they should be compensated, because their labor isn't being used for nothing. Somebody is going out and making
somebody's
a profit.
profiting off of their labor. Yes,
and like they should be compensated for that. They are providing a service, and I do like.
And oftentimes it's jobs nobody else really wants to do.
Yes, and oftentimes like I feel like when they are behind bars, but they are still providing a service. And so, like, we want them, like you were talking about earlier, we want them to leave the prison and go back and be a productive member of society.
Right.
And doing these jobs and being paid a wage, I do feel that it can help them, like, transition better back into society. And it can be
an incentive, right? If I was in jail, heaven forbid, you know what I mean? Like, what can I do to better myself, right? And one thing that I could do that could help me find value, help me find, the right path, is having something that I apply myself towards and work hard at and am rewarded for. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like I agree completely that if they are laboring, they should be provided a wage. There's a reason slavery's over in this country, and it should be over completely, not just for the free people. But kind of a caveat to that is I feel like prisons cost a lot of money and on taxpayers. And I feel like I would have no problem if the prisoners maybe were paid less than minimum wage because they're getting lodging and food for free. Do you know what I mean? And so I feel like it's not a fair trade, because I earn a certain amount of money as a graduate student, and not every penny goes to food and lodging, right? So I still have some that I can choose to do whatever I want with. And I think that if you're incarcerated, that should be the case as well. If you're working enough hours that merit that. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you work an hour a week, I'm not sure that whatever it is you're doing is equal to all the food and the housing, do you know what I mean, that you receive in terms of financial monetary value. So, but I do think you should be compensated for that, whatever you worked, right? But I feel like we can have I don't know what the fair monetary value of their labor would be, because they are receiving a lot of things for free, right? So I've heard of a lot of not a lot of stories. We had a discussion on ethics about this one time, where people that are on the brink of homelessness, that they don't have a family, it's not like they have children they have to take care of, will commit crimes to go to jail because that's better than being homeless, right? So if they're in somewhere safe from the snowstorms for 2 years, which is infinitely better than being homeless. So I feel like people need to be responsible for their impact. And part of the prisoners being responsible is they're serving the time, the punishment for their crime.
Yes.
But I also feel like if they're able-bodied and they're able to work, they should receive compensation for that, but also have to pay, put money towards the things they're receiving, such as food every single day and lodging.
Yeah, so don't know the whole financial structure of.
I don't either.
Yeah, but I think that, like, these prisoners that are put to work, the jail or the prison, they are receiving some compensation for whatever company that they're working for, in terms of.
So it's not like they get zero money.
Yeah, I think somebody is making money off of. Somebody's making money off of this labor, and I think the profit that is being made, that should be given to towards the prisons being able to function.
Yes, towards the prisons being able to function, because I feel like it costs the taxpayers a lot of money to create these prisons, to staff these prisons, to feed these prisoners, to provide the medication these prisoners need. Yeah, that all costs money.
Yeah, so I think that should come from the profit of the labor, because the labor is creating a profit.
Yes,
if you're going to use this labor to create a profit,
then you need to be responsible for making sure that labor can sustain and continue. You know what I mean?
Yes, and has living in humane conditions
to create that labor.
And
yes.
So I feel like that in turn goes back to the companies and the contracts that the prisons have,
right?
For
because if you think about a business, having a prisoner do that labor is way cheaper because it's not minimum wage.
Yes.
I don't know that for certain, but I would imagine it's not minimum wage. But you also don't have to pay for healthcare. You don't have to pay for all this stuff because the taxpayers are paying for that. Do you know what I mean? So it's extremely cheaper for the company than if they hired normal, regular people. And I don't think that's fair. That's pushing the burden on the taxpayer that I don't necessarily think is fair.
What? You don't think it's fair to...
I don't think it's fair that the companies do that. I really like your idea that you're proposing, that the companies then should pay more tax towards running the facilities, providing humane situations for all the prisoners that live there.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? If the taxpayer is going to pay into it, then the companies need to pay, and they need to pay
more. In my opinion.
Commensurate to their profits.
Yes.
No company is going to be well, I'm not going to use this labor force if every single profit is gone back. That's a zero-sum game. I'm not going to do that. So I think the company should still get some profit because the prisoners need to have some job. But I think that the amount of profit should be drastically less.
Yes, whatever that number is.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I feel like if people are working, and whether they are in prison or they're out, they should be compensated for that. The companies or whoever they have, these contracts with, that should be compensated for. And that should come out of the profits.
And so you're saying you don't necessarily think it should go to the prisoners, but it should maybe go to maintaining...
No, I think it should definitely some of it should go to the prisoners. And I think that will like help boost morale and
Mm-hmm.
like and create a more humane like prison
Right.
society.
I would just argue that, and I agree that some should go back, but I would argue if someone in prison is making 40 grand a year because they're working 40 hours a week, then they should have to pay rent, like stuff that would be similar. Like, I don't think it's fair, like, oh, I'm in jail now, I can just keep all my money tax-free, and I don't have to pay for rent, and I don't have to pay for food. Like, I think
like,
that...
There's
so
no,
I think...
there's no way they're going to get, like, nobody, like, there's no way in the world anybody would get that type of money, like, anywhere near that type of money.
Well, it depends on what the wage is. If it's minimum wage,
there's no way. There's no
well,
way,
really
like, there's no way our government or our, like, policies would allow for that. Like, there's no, like, allow for somebody in prison to make $40,000.
And so, do you think that's because they're paying them not enough, or do you think...
Like, there's no way it would be, like, from whether they're paying them enough, whether they're taxing them, like...
Well, I guess my point is, if you're trying to argue that they deserve all the rights, then they also they deserve the responsibilities of paying for maintaining their health and life, right? As a free citizen, I have to pay for my food. If you're incarcerated and you're making money, there's no reason you shouldn't have to contribute money towards that as well. I'm not saying they need to pay for everything. They're in jail, just like you said. They may not be able to afford it. And maybe that's the deal. Maybe their wage is less specifically because a lot of stuff is being provided to them for free. But I feel like if you're providing them certain humanities, they should have certain responsibilities as well. Do you think it's fair that they get all their food is paid for and they don't have to pay to...
So their food, like, from my understanding...
I don't think it's good food.
I think the standard of the food is not, like...
But this is the whole point. Like, they're striking to have that standard of the food be at a certain level.
Yes.
And I completely agree. Like, nobody wants mealy potatoes. Like, it needs to be nutritious, healthful. Like, they don't need to have amazing gourmet chef meals all the time.
But I don't think that's not what they're asking for.
Right, I don't think they're either. But the point is, it needs to be at some standard level of human decency.
Yes.
But that costs money. Yes. And so if they have the ability to labor and earn money, then I think... I liked your idea before about the corporation that's profiting off of their labor to pay more towards that. Because, like, it costs money, and right now the taxpayer is providing that money. And I don't think it's fair that the corporation can use this labor at a much discounted rate, and then the taxpayer has to pay for the labor. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
For the laborer to have a humane place to live and work. So I think more of that should come from the companies. But I feel like if you're going to make the argument that it can come from the companies, I don't see any logical reason why you couldn't extend that argument to the prisoner themselves. And I'm wondering if that's why currently the prisoner is not earning minimum wage. I wonder how that all came about.
Well, I believe that, like, policymakers have stated, well, we have to keep this place up and running, so we cannot pay you a wage.
But that's the thing, though. It's not keeping this place up and running. It's taxpayers are keeping the place up and running.
But, like, the reason,
the corporate, like...
But not, like, taxpayers have to contribute in order to, like, have a society that is, like, operational.
It's a government entity. It's federally funded completely by the...
But there are privately owned jails.
There are?
Yeah.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah, so, like...
Okay, so I guess it depends, right? There's different institutions that have different rules, it sounds like. Because a privately owned prison can have very different rules and very different funding sources than a governmental facility that's entirely funded by the government and taxpayer money. This whole conversation, I've been operating under the assumption that they're completely government-funded entities with no private oversight.
There are definitely some, like, private oversight for prisons. I do think that there has to be, like...
That's very interesting, because that adds a whole nother layer of, like,
I am not an expert on this,
yeah, neither
but
am I. pretty confident. Because if that is true, that adds a whole other layer, like I was saying, of like, how can we take advantage of these people?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Interesting. We'll get back to you on this. Okay, so I think in terms of this first bullet, we are basically in agreement that any labor they provide, they should be compensated for.
Yes.
And any resources they receive, such as the building they live in, the food that they eat, should be up to a certain humane standard.
Yes.
And that costs money.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone profiting off of their labor, which if they were a free person would be the company they work for and themselves, right? If I work 60 hours a week, that's more than working 40 hours a week, and I get more money, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, the company I work for is profiting off my labor, but so am I.
Yes. Right?
So there needs to be some responsibility either from the company or the individual, or maybe both. Maybe that's just my opinion, not yours.
Yeah.
To pay to help maintain that certain level of
the prison.
Standard. Yeah. But I definitely think that we both agree that any labor given should be compensated.
Yes, we do agree on that.
And that someone should be responsible for paying to maintain a certain level of.
Yes. And you think that.
My understanding is that right now is that person responsible for maintaining a certain level of standard is the taxpayer. But I could be wrong because I did not realize about these private prisons.
Yes. It is not only on the taxpayers.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. So do we feel like moving on to
let's move on to the next one.
So the next one, the demand is that the Prison Litigation Reform Act must be rescinded, allowing imprisoned humans a proper channel to address grievances and violations of their rights. And we looked this up very briefly before this podcast, and essentially what has happened was this act was put in place in 1996, and the prior 20 to 30 years there was a lot of situations similar to this strike that's going on, mm-hmm. where prisoners felt that their rights were being violated and they were trying to fix it.
Yeah, and they went to litigation with federal courts
in order to
get the situation rectified.
And so this act was put in place to try to minimize the number of cases that went to litigation. And another result of the act was that the provider is only required to provide as minimal solution to fix the rights violation, which may not necessarily be in the best interest of the prisoners.
Yes.
So one way we kind of gave a hypothetical example to ourselves is if the nutrition is really poor. I'm not a nutritionist. Someone might say, oh, the least expensive, the minimal thing that we're required to do is just provide vitamins so that they all have nutrition. Well, that's not necessarily good nutrition, right? You could still have very poor meal outcomes, but you have this multivitamin. That doesn't necessarily mean you have good nutrition. So we kind of interpreted it to mean as, I don't really want to say a loophole, but kind of legal documentation for disincentivizing anyone to try to bring this litigation forward.
Yeah.
Really trying, not because it's not disincentivizing the prisoners, but it's really incentivizing the prison structure to quell any of these things and not let it get to litigation. And then once it does, it's like a backdoor of well, we just have to do the bare minimum.
Yeah, so for me, I saw it as basically the government is we are spending too much money on litigation, and when we go to federal litigation, the courts oftentimes agree with the prisoners, and we then have to spend money in order to fix these situations.
So now we have to spend money twice, right, to fix the situation and for the litigation.
Yeah. So we want to
minimize all that.
We want to minimize this. We want to make it harder for, first of all, to go to federal court, and then also, if it does go, then it just says that we have to do the most bare minimum thing.
Right. The bar has been lowered in terms of what we need to do.
Yes.
In result of that litigation.
Yes. And because
I do feel the federal government from the beginning didn't want to be can we spend $10,000 or can we spend $1 million? Let's choose $1 million. They always have wanted to do the least.
The bare minimum.
Like the least expensive, but I feel like this just somehow dropped the threshold more so that they could legally get away with doing even less than they might have otherwise.
Yes.
Is that how you interpreted it?
Yes.
And so I think this is a big issue because it would be different. I feel like it would be different if it was any other thing that they're trying to get, but basic human rights are basic human rights, and they should be afforded to you at all. Like, I feel like this is just another example of, like, I don't know what the term is, but, like, when the system is holding you down, like, systematic subjugation by, like, an oppression by the whole, do you know what I mean? Like, the rules reinforce that you're at the bottom, and, like, you're stuck, you know what I mean? Like, there's no fair,
it's systematic oppression.
Yes.
Because basically, like, there are people in the government and policymakers who are saying, like, if we went to court, we would lose this battle.
Right. So let's not let it go to court.
Let's not let it get to court. And if it does get to court, we're going to have the judge say, well, you have to do the bare minimum. And that solves this problem. On to the next way to find a way to make more money.
And we feel like that may not actually solve the human rights violation problem.
Yes. And it definitely, in my opinion, I don't trust our government to say that, like, they're doing the bare minimum. Like
you, whatever they say, you're already thinking they're doing less. So if they say they're doing the bare minimum, you're like, you're not really making the. Is that what you're trying to say? Okay. So, yeah, and I think there is something to be said for, prisoners have lost some of their rights. That is their punishment.
Yes.
But they have not lost every single one. And as a decent society, like, how can we really say we're a civilized, altruistic society trying to help these people if we are not giving them basic needs? Mm-hmm. Right?
And also, I would say, like, not giving them basic needs, but not giving them the ability to come forth and, like, when those basic needs or basic rights have been violated, not giving them the avenue or the
not empowering them to make
ability to come forth and say, hey, this is not right. This A, B, and C needs to be changed, and it's on you guys to change it. Like,
yes, I
not giving them the ability to come forth
I think
in
that's
front
the
of a
worst
court
part.
of law is the worst part. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, they may go to the court of law and people may decide, like, no, we're sorry. We all disagree. Right? But they should be, just like I can choose to sue anyone I want for any reason. Right? I have to pay for the lawyer. That's fine. But, like, I have that ability. And if it's different when it's like a basic right. Do you know what I mean? Like, I should be able to talk about that and get that need addressed no matter what I've done, no matter who I am. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Okay.
All right. So what's the next?
The next one.
Oh, I feel like we
felt very strong. Yeah. Okay. So the next one. Do you want to read it?
Sure.
Okay. I think it's number 5.
Yes. An immediate end to the racial overcharging, oversentencing, and parole denials of black and brown humans. Black humans shall no longer be denied parole because the victim of the crime was white, which is a particular problem in southern states.
Boom. Okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
So I find it, based on the wording of that, very difficult to disagree.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, is this a real thing? White people
definitely a real thing.
Do crime against so many white people, right? Like, if the crime is I stole something or I broke into their home, like, if the crime is something bad and I'm a white person and I committed it to another white person and I get whatever parole, any black person that did the same thing to a white person should get the same. Like, really, people? Like, it's so depressing when these are real life situations.
Yeah.
And I will say, maybe I led a sheltered life as a child in Colorado, But I truly did not appreciate how alive and well racism is until I moved to North Carolina. And that was really shattering to me about, like, I had this concept that America was this great ideal and, like, all of these things, and everybody has a bad history, but we're really getting better. And then I was like, are we? Are we?
Yeah.
Maybe not nearly as much as I thought. So it's very troubling to me that two people committing the same crime would not have the same outcome. And I think there's a lot to be said for, well, it's not just the crime, there's the past history, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel like you could make some arguments that maybe certain groups of people are punished harsher for prior crimes, and so that's another problem that needs addressing.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have a hypothetical that two people have committed the same crime with the same type of history, right? So if one person has 3 other violations of the same level and this person does 2, like, you know, because the history plays a role in what they...
Yes.
You know, and I'm not arguing that. I think that's fair and good.
Mm-hmm.
But 2 equal histories should receive the same penalty.
Yeah.
And I just can't believe it's any other way.
Yeah, so I am from South Carolina, and I can definitely believe that it is the other way, where, like, 2 people can literally do the same act or the same violation, and they will receive completely different sentences. Yeah. And it starts, in my opinion, it starts even from, like, elementary school, and, like, this, like, it's a bias. It's an unimplicit bias.
So you think? So do you think
like,
it's an implicit bias?
Like people aren't consciously.
That's implicit.
Yeah. So it's implicit bias.
I think that's part of it.
Yes, that is definitely part.
And I think that's what may start in elementary school.
Yes, and I think that starts in, like, elementary school, where, like, kids, you see that, like, black and brown kids are getting punished at a higher and more severe rate than their, like, white counterparts. And
it happens in many facets of life. Like, in addition to just punishing, you know, like, they've done plenty of studies that ethnic names get rejected on college letters of application, even though if you swap the name with Johnny Mayfair, they get right in, you know what I mean? So I think that implicit bias happens on a widespread scale, and it happens at many stages throughout almost birth, probably even pregnancy and pregnancy care through adulthood.
Yeah, and my point was that, like, that implicit bias, it kind of filtrates its way into, like, sentences.
Right.
Why am I having such a hard time with that word?
Because it's a real struggle, this whole situation.
Yeah, so, like, it filters its way into, like, judgments, and, like, when somebody gets sentenced to prison,
right.
It filters its way into that, and some of it I do think it's implicit, but I do think that there is a conscious effort to, like, in a lot of ways, put, like, black and brown people in their place, and say, hey, like, you've done this, and we're going to show everybody else that if anybody else that's black or brown, if you do this, then you're going to receive the same or worse consequences. So in a lot of ways, it's not like the punishment isn't for, like, that individual person.
Or the individual crime.
Or the individual crime. The punishment is for...
To make an example.
Make an example for all of that community.
Right. Right. And that's, again, it would be fine if we were doing the same with the white offenders.
Yes. Well, it wouldn't be fine even if we were doing it.
No, I do think if we're making an example of the white offenders, like, that just means the punishment for that particular crime got more severe for everybody. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So we might be able to argue that this particular crime doesn't warrant that outcome. Yeah. But as long as we're applying it equally to everyone, I don't have a problem with that. Like, I do have a problem if punishments are more severe, but if they're being applied equally, I think for me, like, fine.
I would not want to have more severe punishment.
Yeah, I'm not. I think it depends on the crime. I think there are certain crimes. My particular opinion is the punishment is not severe enough, And other crimes, my particular opinion is like, this punishment is way too severe.
Mm.
And I think you could ask anyone when you lay out, here are all the crimes, here are all the...
Yeah, but and I'm talking like generally across the board. I would like to see more like
more
leniency in terms of...
Right. And my point is just, we do see a lot of leniency, just not for the black and brown offenders.
Yes, yes.
Right? So as long as we're being consistent, whether it's lenient consistent or harsh consistent.
You're okay with it?
Yeah. So...
Alright.
In terms of consistency. Okay, so the next one, I think, was number 8.
Yes.
Okay, and this one reads, state prisons must be funded specifically to offer more rehabilitation services. And this I could not agree more with. And it goes back to my point at the beginning. If going to jail was like, the one strike, you're out forever, then like I said, we wouldn't have jail. It would be a very different thing, right? Mm. So the whole concept is built on the fact that we expect them to come back.
Yeah, to rehabilitate them.
It's just like kicking them when they're down. It's another systematic form of oppression if, they're in there and they can't, when it's time to come out, they don't have what they need to be successful when they come out. And every person is responsible for their actions. I don't want to minimize that. But I do feel like there are things we could do to make the transition from a criminal to a productive member of society better, and to give more criminals the chance to become productive members of society, right? Some are going to make it based on how it is right now. Some are going to not make it, no matter how many services we have. But I think the most humane thing to do is to give services, to give as many people as humanly possible the chance of being productive members of society again.
Yes.
And I think this goes back a lot to people with mental health problems are not getting the care that they truly need.
Yes.
Right? And so they may not be criminals if they were getting their health care. Mm. Right? And so, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you said, in that we want, like, when somebody goes to prison, there are a lot of circumstances involved. And, like, to have, like, a little empathy for those people, and, like, in those situations, and that, like, people, like, I want to believe that there's good in all of us. Mm-hmm. And if we can find a way to, like, build up that good in people, and give them hope, I believe that people will, like, rebound and can come out in a better place. So if we're giving them that option, I do think that the majority of people will take it, and creating, like, a prison that has, like, rehabilitation and is, like, we want, like, showing them we want you to come out on the other side of this in a better place. Mm-hmm. And this demand, request through the prison strike, I think, is giving those people, like, listen, we understand that we've done bad things and that's why we're in here, but we also, like, we want to get back out there to our families. Mm-hmm. And that I do believe there are people in prison that wants to get back out to their families and want to be, like, a productive part of society.
Right.
And this demand is asking for that opportunity to do that.
Right. And I agree with everything you just said. I think that was so empathetic and so wonderful, and you have just a little heart of gold. I love it. But I would also like to talk about the financial aspect of the situation, because I feel like it would be so much cheaper for everyone involved if we just gave them the tools to be successful when they get out. Do you know what I mean? Do you know how many criminals are reoffenders and go back to jail? It would be so much better for their families, for them, for the prison system, if they didn't have to keep rehousing them, refeeding them. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So spending a little more to save a lot more is, to me, like a no-brainer. And I feel like there's a lot of people, I know for me, I associate prisoner or jail with like, oh my god, you killed someone. Or, oh my god, you're Larry Nassar, right? Like,
Yeah,
very,
the worst of the worst.
worst of the worst. But we hear about those on the news. If the millions of people in prison all were like that, we would be inundated with these news stories. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know the numbers, but my logic tells me that the average person in prison is not that, right? They may have, I don't know what it is, but it's not that. And there are so many people that go to jail for a month, for 2 months, for 6 months, for random stupid little things. Do you know what I mean? That I'm like, I can't even believe that's meriting jail. and so, like, I just feel like there's so many other ways to help people. But anyway, that to me, it just seems like it would be such a better investment of our money to take these prisoners and really try to help them turn it around, as opposed to like just scooting them out the door and then it's this revolving door and they come back in. Like, this may not be a good analogy, but I feel, if a kid is struggling in 4th grade with reading, a lot of times they just get scooted on through, and now in 5th grade they're struggling even worse. Scooted on through because no teacher wants to deal with that, right? And it looks bad on the school to have students failing. It's a big problem for the it's just a big problem. So a lot of times people would be like, yeah, we'll sweep this under the rug. Now it's 12th grade and the kid can barely read. They're at a disservice their whole freaking life. Do you know what I mean? Like, that is just holding them back in 4th grade, while it might have been an issue at the time, puts their whole life on such a better trajectory. Do you know what I mean? Like, and sure, you can make arguments that for any scenario it may not, but I truly feel, in general, it would be a much better trajectory than letting the problem persist and not actually addressing it. And that's how I feel these rehabilitation programs are. There's always going to be really violent crimes. There's always going to be people that don't respond to rehabilitation programs. But I feel like the overwhelming majority of people would respond. And it would make them. Yeah. So I just feel like it'd be a much better investment of our money. Yeah. Just have to say that. All right. I think we have one more. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So this one says, this is another one that I'm like, I read it and I'm like, how can anyone disagree? So, the voting rights of all confined citizens serving prison sentences, pretrial detainees, and so-called ex-felons must be counted. Representation is demanded. All voices count. And I could maybe, it would be very hard to convince me, but I might be convinced that a certain population of prisoners, in addition to losing many of their life and liberties, have lost the right to vote. Maybe. But this says, like, pre-trial detainees. They're not even convicted yet. Is that a true statement?
Yes.
And ex-felons, like, they're back out in society?
Yeah.
Like, so they're in society. Like, what? They've served their time. They've done, like, it's not a punishment if it's, like, continuing for forever. Do you know what I mean? Like, at some point, we have to be like, okay, the punishment is over.
Yes, you have served your time.
Yeah. So, even though I started this response out very poorly, I do feel like most prisoners deserve to have a vote.
Yes.
But especially those that have paid their dues and are not even convicted yet.
Yeah. I completely agree.
This blows my mind.
I completely agree with you on this. And it's, like, it only serves, like, if you think about it, who does it actually, like, serve for, like, prisoners and ex-prisoners? Like, or, like, I can understand, like, while you're in prison, not being able to vote. Like, that's part of, like, that's
sure,
one
if
of
that's
the
what
rights.
we as a society...
Yeah, that's one of your rights that, like, is taken away from you. But after you've served your time, like, getting back out into society, and, like, we want you to become a productive member. But we talk all about how it's important to, like, get out and vote. And, like, who does it hurt to have, like, ex-felons voting? Like, why don't they deserve a right? Why don't they deserve their voices to be heard?
Well, I think it's just another systematic oppression. If you look at the number, if the ratio of white people to black people in the U.S. is whatever it is, the ratio of white people to black people in prisons is much lower. Like, there are a disproportionate number of black people incarcerated, right? And so if when they get out, a large population can't vote, who does that serve? The people in power. Do you know what I mean? So I can't say for sure, but I would really hope that it wasn't like conscious choices of like, ooh, how can we keep these people oppressed?
Yeah.
But that's the effect, right?
It is definitely the effect.
And I just feel like it's very hypocritical if we say, okay, you can be in our society now. You're free. You're subject to our laws. You're subject to these agreements, but you don't get a say. Like, I don't think that's fair at all.
No, I don't believe it's fair. And it goes against the idea that, like, you go to jail, you serve your time, and then you come back and you're an American now. You're still an American. You're a part of our society.
Right.
It goes, in my opinion, it goes against what we stand for.
Mm-hmm. And I think it just reinforces that whole, like, is this a punishment for a little bit or is this a punishment for life? Right? If we wanted one strike and you're out of everything, then it's one strike and you're out of everything. But that's not what we have.
Yeah.
So we need to, like, act like it. I don't know. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I think that is it. Thank you guys for listening.
To this impassioned
yes.
discussion.
And, like, there are so many stories and documentaries. Ava DuVernay, she has a documentary called The 13th. It's on the 13th Amendment on Netflix. There's different articles about, like, prison wardens being paid, like, bonuses from, like, the departmental, like, the department being under budget, basically. So the warden gets, like, a little kickback bonus.
Oh, so it's like I'm allocated X amount of dollars.
Yes.
But if instead of spending $10 on every person's meal, I'm going to spend $9.50.
Yeah.
Right. I get that extra 50 cents per. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yes.
I definitely feel like an independent third party should be managing the finances. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, maybe that's an idealistic perspective.
Sure.
Conversation for another day. But
yeah, it is a very, like,
unacceptable
corrupt system.
And that's probably why there's all these human rights violations, right? Because on the surface, you know, the government says, well, we've allocated $10 for every meal. That's perfectly enough to provide a healthful, nutritious, basic human need. But if we've got these wardens skimming off the top, then suddenly what the prisoners receive is not actually that.
Yes. So it is definitely, like, it's more than anything, like, the way we treat our prisoners and the way we treat the way we treat them is a reflection of our society. And I think, like, that's part of the reason why, like, I wanted to have this discussion because hopefully we can get to a place in society where we treat them in humane ways and we give them the ability to get back out in society and be productive members.
I agree. Couldn't have said it better myself. So this month, that's what we've been thinking about, and that's what we're doing.
Deuces.